Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's another edition of Let's Talk Broncos. We are back. It is off season. I'm in the full swing of the draft season right now. I know Zach is going to get into it as well here just in a second. We were texting a little about that today. This is a fun episode, though. I'm excited for it. In light of the crazy Luka Doncic trade that happened, well, it would be 2 days ago. We are going to go through some potential ridiculous blockbuster-esque trades that could happen for the Broncos. Maybe not all the way realistic, right? But either was the Luka Doncic one. Maybe this opens the door for the Broncos to start making some cold calls around the other 32 teams. So, Zach, how are you feeling today, man?
That's way worse. All right. I feel much better. I feel great, Joey. I'm happy to be here on the show with you. And yeah, like you said, I mean, who would have thought the Luka Doncic trade was realistic? I've seen so many memes of people trying that trade in like the ESPN trade machine, trying that trade in NBA 2K, and the computer saying, nope, this trade's not realistic. It wouldn't be accepted. You know, it's weird things happen in sports all the time. Who's to say that a team wouldn't make a stupid trade. You know, we could have some fun with it. Let's live on the wild side. And I also don't think some of the ideas I'm going to throw out, I think they're unlikely to happen, but I think all of them are plausible. I'm not throwing out Broncos trade for Josh Allen or whatever. I think all of them could certainly happen in some universe.
Okay, there you go. This is going to be a fun one. It was fun even just being creative through it and trying to figure out different options like that. Zach has an article coming out too with some trades. He won't list all of them today, maybe some of them, and he's going to have a ton more in an article coming out soon. But before we get into that, I want to make sure we hit on some of the topics, so some of the breaking news-esque things that have happened, and that is the Broncos coaching moves. It feels like we are being picked apart out here. Notable names: Chris Banjo, he's going to the Jets to be their special teams coordinator. Darren Mugi, right? He was an assistant GM. He was hired here as an interim, worked under the Elway days even. He's going off to be the Jets GM. Tight end coach Declan Doyle going to the Bears to be their offensive coordinator. John Morton, who is the passing game coordinator down here, is going to be the Lions offensive coordinator. And then kind of just finishing off with David Shaw is then going to go with him with the Lions to be a pass game coordinator. We are being picked apart out here, Zach. What do you make of all of this?
You know, I think it's twofold. Or even threefold, maybe. One, I think it's an incredible compliment to the staff the Denver Broncos have put together. This isn't happening to bad staffs. This isn't happening to staffs with outdated ideas either. You know, I know it was a common talking point in Broncos country this year. Sean Payton's offense is old and outdated. Well, this is a pretty loud declaration from the NFL, and specifically like the top offensive ecosystems, right? Everyone's trying to get a piece of Ben Johnson and his ideas. Well, who does he want a piece of? Sean Payton and Sean Payton's ideas. The Detroit Lions now scrambling to replace Ben Johnson to keep their offense afloat. What well do they want to tap into? Sean Payton and his ideas. So I think it's an amazing compliment to what they've constructed, and also I don't know, should just have Broncos country feeling more confident about, the ecosystem Sean Payton is going to be able to construct to get the most out of Bo Nix over, these coming seasons. I think that's the positive element. The negative element is, this is a lot of brain drain. You are losing a lot of smart minds in those offensive meeting rooms or game planning rooms. And that is definitely a negative. I think the positive spin there is it's going to force you to bring some new ideas in. The Rams offense kind of got back on track after Sean McVay had to bring in, some voices from the Patriots organization and, kind of go outside his typical tree. It led to a lot of development and growth with that Rams offense. So it can end up being a positive thing, but the brain drain, I do think, is a valid concern.
Okay. Yeah. I take it very similar to you, Zach, where one, I think it's a huge compliment to what the Broncos are doing out here. You mentioned it. Anyone that's saying the Broncos offense is outdated, the NFL is clearly telling you right now it's not. Matter of fact, it's what we're looking for. Ben Johnson, Sean Payton, very similar stylistical offenses, and you see guys from the Lions getting jobs all over where, and you see guys from the Broncos staff get jobs all over. I think, though, the most interesting and the best news about all of this is the guys that they were able to retain. When I sit there and think about the most important coaches, part of Sean Payton's staff, other than Sean Payton, one, Zach Strief would come to mind, offensive line coach for the Broncos. He's done a phenomenal job. Having to replace him would be tough. That is one. I think that is your most important position coach. Every single time your hire there is big, and when you have to replace them, you're changing things like stylistically and a lot of different things there. These guys are usually handed the plays and tasked with how we are blocking these up. So you are changing things stylistically when you have to replace an offensive line coach. Jim Leonard comes to mind. Defensive back coach, was a very successful defensive coordinator. I was shocked that he wasn't one of the first ones gone trying to go get a DC job in the NFL. And then third, and maybe the most important out of all of them, is Davis Webb. You saw Bo Nix have a great year this season, and he's this quarterback coach, younger guy. NFL's probably thinking, he might need a little more seasoning, but the Broncos were able to convince him to come back too. So those three ones are huge. I think they're the three most important coaches, part of the staff. And the fact that we're getting picked apart right now, but still retaining those guys, is huge.
Fully agree. And it's good that you have some obvious replacements for some of this brain drain, like Chris Banjo going out. Well, it seems like Darren Rizzi is almost certainly going to be the Broncos special teams coordinator. He's one of the best regarded special teams coordinators in the league. So, I know Banjo's an assistant, but they kind of, with the firing of Kotwicka, or Kotwicka, however you say it, purged that room. But okay, who's coming in? A pretty known asset who he knows really good at his job. So I think that you feel good about. To your point about Davis Webb, you're losing John Morton, that pass game coordinator. I bet Davis Webb keeps his quarterback coach title, but I bet in order to make it a little harder for these other NFL teams to pluck him away, that they give Davis Webb a nicer title this offseason. And it's something like quarterback coach / passing game coordinator. And again, we know Payton thinks very highly of him. If Payton's evaluation of that is right, that should mitigate some of the brain drain. And I think that's another element here of these coaches getting hired away. It is a commentary on Sean Payton's ability to evaluate coaching talents and build a staff. So it sucks you're losing these guys, but who knew Declan Doyle 3 years ago? Who knew this John Morton guy 3 years ago? And Sean Payton plucked them out and helped them get to this point. And I think you feel fairly confident he can do that again. I think the biggest maybe offseason development for the Broncos this entire offseason will be keeping both Jim Leonard and Vance Joseph. Vance Joseph had a quote when he went to the Cardinals that is always stuck in my head, where he talked about how he thinks it takes 3 years for a coach to install a defensive system, right? Where all the players know all the different calls and it can communicate really smoothly and all the pieces fit together. And he talked about that value of the third year. And he was really disappointed he didn't get that third year in Denver, because he felt, and I imagine a lot of people don't feel this way, but he felt that third year it would have finally clicked, and that would have been the year his coaching tenure in Denver really worked out. Well, now he's getting that third year to run this defense in Denver. And so that's something I'm excited about. And then you're keeping Jim Leonard too, who looks like one of the best, if not the best defensive backs coach in the league. The physicality the defensive backs played with last year was amazing. I think he got better performances out of all of them than Christian Parker did. And Christian Parker is an amazing defensive backs coach in his own right. So and then Zach Strief, of course, I fully agree there. Those three retentions are far more important than the losses, and just great news for Broncos country. I would be very excited about all those.
Total agreement. And this is, well, let's move on to a different topic here. It's very similar. It's coaching that goes with a division rival, that being the Raiders. They hired Pete Carroll, and just recently hired Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator. That's a really interesting one to me. I mean, he's always been a very innovative guy. His NFL tenure did not work out, though. Obviously, this last year, play calling for the Ohio State Buckeyes, they were super successful. He's always had a really good ground game. That's something I would keep in mind for people. Like they steal Chip Kelly's run concepts very frequently in the NFL and use them. Zach, what do you make of this Chip Kelly hire?
I'm worried about it as a someone who wants the best for the Broncos. You know, I think this Pete Carroll hire is great for them. I don't know if they're going to win a Super Bowl with him, but in terms of like just getting the organization turned around and back into an adult organization that deserves to be taken seriously, I think Pete Carroll's about as good as they could have done. I don't know if I trust Ben Johnson, a first-time head coach, to turn the Raiders around. I think Pete Carroll will be able to get them pointed in the right direction. Not saying that, you know, they're going to be 11-6 or anything like that, but they're not going to be an easy out anymore, like they were just even this past season. So I think that's how. But then the Chip Kelly of it all, it was very apparent to me that Chip Kelly wanted back in the NFL. I heard, you know, several different insiders from all these different sources talking about, now, what do you think about the idea of Chip Kelly returning as an offensive coordinator?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think he's really happy as an offensive coordinator, but I think he'd like to prove, you know, he can do it in the NFL. And it's like, okay, well, Chip Kelly's putting this out there. He wants it known. I thought it might have been Houston. I'm bummed it's going to be the Raiders. I think he's, like you said, a very smart, very innovative offensive mind. His first transition into the NFL didn't quite work, but we haven't seen him in the NFL since 2016. Offensive philosophy has changed a lot over that time. In 2017, the Philadelphia Eagles won a Super Bowl because they broke defensive coordinators' minds with RPOs. And not like complex ones. They just introduced RPO, and the NFL just minds exploded. They didn't know what the fuck to do with it. And so Nick Foles was able to score 40 points against Bill Belichick in a Super Bowl and win Super Bowl MVP. But the NFL was a little Cro-Magnon the last time we saw Chip Kelly trying to integrate his ideas into it. That translation is a lot closer now, where I think he'll have better success. And I think he's going to give Vance Joseph some headaches this season when those two teams play. Glad that the Raiders are fairly low wattage on offense, though. That helps me rest easy.
Yeah, I would say the one concern that you do have with Chip Kelly, I don't think anyone questions his philosophies at all. I would say it's very similar to the Patriots hiring Josh McDaniels, in the light that Chip Kelly, in his time in the NFL, had a very rough time building relationships with his players. And constantly to this day, you still hear LaShawn McCoy and Deshaun Jackson and those guys speak bad on him, say that he was one of the worst coaches they've ever had because of the way he treated them as players. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, it's just different. I think there's some of that you can get away with in college football, and you do have to adjust a little bit dealing with grown men in the NFL. And that's just something I have my eye out for. If it goes bad, I would say that's the reason why. It's not going to be because of his philosophy or offensive scheme.
And potentially supporting that is the fact that we just saw this Raiders locker room really not work out with Josh McDaniels.
Yeah.
You know, lighting up stogies right after he was fired. That's going to be fresh in a lot of these players' minds. They might not want to deal with it again. Now, the flip side of that, I think, you know, Chip Kelly is the head coach of an operation. There's more of that expected of him.
Yeah.
Versus, you know, now he's an offensive coordinator. It's a little more okay if he just locks himself away in his office and is, drawn up plays all the time.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I think overall it's a good hire for the Raiders there. But let's move into the main topic today, and this is the blockbuster trades. Zach, I want one right off the. Well, actually, I want to do this real quick.
All right.
Okay. So again, this is in light of the Luka Doncic trade. This was it blew everyone's mind. I don't think anyone has to even understand basketball to understand just how crazy of a trade that was, just seeing the compensation and stuff like that. Zach, give me an NFL version of this trade. Like, how bad is it? Like, in my mind, it would be, it would be like trading Matt Stafford for Josh, or Matt Stafford and a fourth for Josh Allen. That's the way I view it.
I think it's even worse than that. I think Anthony Davis, like, he's a star, but he's not one of those dudes. I think at this point, I don't think he's a true number one. I think it's like if you traded Josh Allen for like Christian McCaffrey and a future first round pick. Because it's like, this is a guy that, because Anthony Davis kind of towards the end of his career has the injury concerns. And the motivation behind this trade is like this outdated idea about like defense wins championships. I think that'd be akin to a GM being like, you need an elite running back to win a Super Bowl. And so you trade like Joe Burrow or whatever, Josh Allen, one of these, everyone wants one of these 5 quarterbacks desperately. You trade one of those guys for like a Christian McCaffrey at a first round pick. It is so stupid to me. It's going to ruin the Mavs for like the next decade. Because even if they're a good team, it's like, man, imagine how much better this team would have been if they didn't do that incredibly stupid move.
It's crazy, man. It is really crazy. And even to put more craziness on it, that first round pick that they did trade, it's one in the NFL, you can't even do this. It's a 2029 first round pick. And first round picks in the NBA are not worth the same as first round picks in the NFL. Not even close. I would say like it's probably closer to a 4th round pick in value to an NBA team compared to an NFL team. So it is crazy.
We're talking about the Lakers that are now going to have Luka Doncic leading their organization for that 2028-29 season. Worst case scenario, they're a playoff team. Like, it's not going to be a lottery pick.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be in the 20s.
Bad out here. It's bad out here, guys. But we are not a basketball podcast. We just had to, it's the inspo for the show today. All right, Zach, give me your first Broncos trade, Luka Doncic-esque blockbuster deal. It doesn't have to be as ridiculous, but give me a realistic blockbuster trade for the Broncos.
Here's a big one, and it'll impact the Broncos. Wanted to tie it back to our last little segment there. What if the Raiders, the quarterback needy Raiders, and Pete Carroll, who the oldest head coach in NFL history before he's even coached a single game for the Raiders, he might not want to sit around for this whole rebuild and trying to get Shedeur Sanders ready as an NFL quarterback. What if they trade, that number 6 overall pick? I don't even know if they'd have to go that expensive with. I don't know what they'll trade for it. Let's say they swing a deal for a guy I know Pete Carroll loves and matches a lot of what Pete Carroll exudes in terms of always competing and all that jazz. Geno Smith. What if Geno Smith and the Seahawks, they might be looking to get younger at quarterback. This could line up well for them. They're this offseason probably going to have to make a decision on whether or not they want to re-up with Geno. They might decide, hey, it's time for us to take a bigger swing. And the Raiders might be looking for a win now option. I think Geno Smith could be that. You pair him with Chip Kelly, I think the Raiders would be a lot scarier in that universe.
Now, people are going to yell at you, I already know, in the comment section about that's not blockbuster. That's Geno Smith. Guys, he's super underappreciated, Geno Smith, I think, by the fans. He's a really good quarterback. If you're looking for a guy to just be efficient in straight drop back passing, Geno Smith can go toe-to-toe with almost any of the quarterbacks in that one facet. And I don't think the Seahawks did him well this last year. I think it would automatically make the Raiders a much better football team. I'm not even sure, like you said, it would take a first round pick. I'm imagining something like second round pick and some more, throw some later round picks at it as well.
Yes.
Or like some other capital from the year after that to go along with that second round pick. Because what you said is age. I think this one's super realistic as well. As you mentioned, there's familiarity between him and Pete Carroll already. And then him being as old as he is, Pete Carroll, I don't think it makes sense in the timeline for him to even go out there and draft it. You mentioned Shedeur Sanders, like he might not be willing to develop him. I'm willing to put down that I don't think he will.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just this guy probably realistically, how many more years do we think he's going to coach? I'm thinking like 4 tops, and that's tops. I could see 3 and he's out.
He signed, to your point, he signed a 3-year contract to be the Raiders head coach, which these guys, that doesn't mean he's going to be coaching for 3 years. These guys very often don't see the end of those deals. It's rare when like a Mike McCarthy does see the end of their deal. But to that point, these coaches normally sign for 4, 5, 6 years. Liam Cohen's deal with the Jags is 6 years. So when you see a head coach only sign a 3-year deal, it's very notable and odd.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I like that one, Zach. I think that's realistic as well. I could definitely see that happen. If not Geno, maybe they go out there and get Kirk Cousins or something like that.
Stafford, I think they could be in the Stafford mix if the Rams want to move off him.
I would hate that. I think Stafford's a baller.
I agree.
Out of all those, I want the Raiders to sign Kirk Cousins for sure.
Or Russ. Get the Russ reunion going, Pete Carroll. Those, I think, are great realities for the Denver Broncos. Yeah, I think a Geno Smith, and you're right, he's way undervalued. I think a good argument in favor of Geno Smith would be he, again, with a worse offensive line and worse offensive line play than C.J. Stroud just had in Houston, and worse weapons, frankly, he had a better quarterbacking season. Yeah. So, and I think C.J. Stroud deserves to be forgiven for his rough year. It was really his surroundings. All those arguments we can make for C.J. Stroud can be made even more so for Geno, and Geno just had a better season. So he's, I would say, bordering on top 10 quarterback. I think he's no worse than a top 15 quarterback. So that would make the AFC West a lot more interesting. What's your first Luka Doncic-esque blockbuster trade, Joey?
So I like the approach you took of picking a team where it would affect the Broncos, but I'm going with a trade the Broncos will make with mine. I think the Broncos need a number 1 wide receiver really bad. I struggle with where they are picking right now and thinking there's a guy in the draft that comes in and is that alpha number 1, because that's really what they need. They need that alpha number 1 wide receiver. So I'm looking at seen a Broncos could get Garrett Wilson for a first-round pick and then maybe some change. I could see something like that happen. For sure, he fits exactly what they need as a Z wide receiver that can separate. He fits just part of the room. You have your Cortland Sutton, your big body X wide receiver. Garrett Wilson fills your kind of a Z role. And then you have Marvin Mims as a gadgety player. Maybe you go out in the draft and you're still able to replace your little Jordan Humphrey role there too. And all of a sudden, this Broncos wide receiver room, instead of one of the worst team rooms in the league, we're starting to look at it like, wow, this is a really well put together room with the move of one player.
And I fully agree. I think Devon Villay already maybe fills that little Jordan Humphrey role as that big slot. You get Sutton, there's the X. And yeah, I think you look at that top 4 with Mims off a really breakout season being your 4th, and this guy you can just use in that gadget role and feel very comfortable with that just being his role, not worry about, we need to get more out of this guy or whatever. I think it would be amazing for the Denver Broncos. I think Garrett Wilson
trade, Zach. Would you trade a first and some yeah, you would.
I do a first and a second. I was trying to look for comparable deals for my article on Garrett Wilson, and I think the most comparable ones are you have to go all the way back to Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. And Devontae Adams goes to the Raiders for a first and a second round pick. Tyreek Hill goes to the Dolphins for a first, a second, 2 4s, and a 6. Now, both those guys had a lot better stats, more accolades to their name. They were also, in Adams' case, 3 years older. Tyreek Hill was 3 years older. Adams was 5 years older. I think it all balances out, and he goes around that Adams price tag for like a first and a second. And I would gladly do it. I think in the NFL analysis game, the best wide receiver analyst there is Matt Harmon, has a great site, Reception Perception, where he charts like every receiver play. Are they winning on their routes? What are they doing after the catch? What are they doing at the catch point? It's an invaluable resource. His Garrett Wilson profile is elite. It's like this guy is Justin Jefferson potentially, like just hiding in plain sight, and the quarterback thing just hasn't worked out for him, which I don't think is a far-fetched story to tell yourself. Had Zach Wilson for the lion's share of his career. And then Aaron Rodgers is incredibly particular about throwing to guys that are doing what he wants them to do. And so that was going to be Devontae Adams. That was going to be Alan Lazard, who he had played with for several seasons. It's going to be who else they have? Randall Cobb and all those guys. And you see the flashes of brilliance with Garrett Wilson. Like the talent, I think, is so apparent. I would absolutely snatch him up. And that is the best possible outcome for the Broncos. And it's I think fairly realistic. I wouldn't bet on it happening, but they should be calling Muji up until Muji blocks their damn number with just like different ideas.
That's the thing too. There's obviously a relationship there with the Jets general manager now. And then Garrett Wilson has made it known that he doesn't really like it down there right now. So I think it is possible. I do think it would probably be a little less than what you're thinking, Zach, just because I am thinking now would be the time to trade for Garrett Wilson because he's coming off of a bad year. And I do think that affects trade value, just year-to-year production, straight stats. They probably look at that and they're thinking, okay, now would be the time to get still a huge believer in him, but now might be the time to get the most bang for my buck there in a trade. So I totally agree with you. Do you want me to give one now, another one, or do you want to go?
I'll throw one out. I got a good one for you.
Please do.
All right. We're going again. Luka Doncic. Let's talk some big swings here. Let's get a little crazy. I think there's other tight ends that are maybe more realistic here, but let's talk about George Kittle. I don't think this is too crazy. We're talking about a tight end that has a pretty questionable injury history. He will turn 32 years old next season. And after the 2025 season, he's going to need a new contract. So he might even be negotiating said contract this offseason. Which is also an interesting element because the 49ers are in maybe not salary cap hell, but they are in a pretty rough cap situation.
After Brock Purdy, it could turn into hell.
Exactly. So that's the thing. They are staring down the barrel of some really hard decisions to make. And frankly, they can't keep all these pieces. And not only do they have to re-up with Brock Purdy, they also probably have to re-up with Trent Williams, who's really important. Nick Bosa's coming before too long. Charvarius Ward, their best secondary player is a free agent this year. They might want to try and re-sign him. It's a bit of a mess right now.
Yeah, something has to give, and that's exactly what the Broncos would need is a tight end in George Kittle, one that can really block his ass off, one that can create explosive plays in open field. It brings the same type of juice to an offense, maybe not to the extent, but similar. Like the Broncos have no juice part of their offense outside Marvin Mims. A Garrett Wilson or a George Kittle, even on a different role, does it in different ways, but can still get chunk plays after the catch or downfield.
And because he still has a lot more value and is still a pretty dang good player, he would yield more for the 49ers in trade than Deebo Samuel. Mm-hmm. Yes, the 49ers probably would rather trade Deebo Samuel because he's a worse player and his contract does not look great right now, especially with his decline. That's why other teams probably don't want to trade for Deebo Samuel. I don't know if the Niners will even get – it might be like a 7th-round pick because really what they're getting is a team taking – Deebo Samuel's $20 million salary off their hands. I don't think it's going to be a great deal that they get for Deebo. So because of that, they might want to keep him and they might decide to trade It might be a Jawan Jennings, or, because we're talking big names here, a George Kittle, who, again, they might look at it, go, we're not going to re-up with this guy after next season. Let's get ahead of it and get some quality picks in return. And then I think it makes sense for the Denver Broncos because if you don't go tight end in the first round this year, you don't have a great path for an immediate answer in 2025. Yes, we've seen some guys, blossom their rookie years and have really productive rookie years. I don't know if any of those guys have been taken outside, the top 50 picks, and the Broncos only have the one top 50 pick this year. So I just, if it's not a Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland, how are you getting that 2025 help at the position? This could be a great avenue for it. And while I think it'd be more costly or you'll give up more than the Niners will get for Debo, I don't think we're talking about a first round pick here. Again, 31-year-old tight end. He's missed a fair share of games. He's got a big contract. He's only got 1 year left on that contract. So you're going to probably have to re-up with him after you trade him. I think it's maybe a couple mid-round picks, and, sign me up for that while I have a maybe rookie learn and develop under Kittle for a few years. And in the meantime, I'm giving Bo an elite weapon to work with.
Yeah. No, I love that. Or you could just go out there and draft a move tight end, and now all of a sudden the entire tight end room is completely different. George Kittle's working that inline role. Like I mentioned earlier, an ass kicker in the blocking game for you guys that don't know, both in run, where Sean Payton and his run scheme, they could get so creative, having him fly around, get upfield on players, getting on a double and helping an offensive lineman. But also, hey, our quarterback needs more time. George Kittle can sit back there and pass protect. He did it a lot when everyone was upset about the Broncos signing Mike McGlinchey. Mike McGlinchey's turned it around. Shout out to him. A big reason was, man, Trent Williams is over there locking things up. George Kittle, he's always on Mike McGlinchey's side, just like as an extra guy over there. Like, so that it would be that would be an awesome addition in the blocking game as well. I think you would see huge production increase. And then you go out there and draft your running back with George Kittle. Stop it. Broncos might be a top 5 run game. Might have a top 5 run game next year. Okay, I got one for you too, Zach. I have to preface it before everyone yells at me that I'm not necessarily saying that I want all of these to happen, right? I'm just throwing out ideas. I'm just throwing out what could happen. And in this situation, the Broncos aren't the one attaining a player. They're the one trading to Luka. That's what's going on right now. I have the Broncos getting an early to mid-second and some change in exchange for Nick Bonito is one that I have out there. Entering the last year of his deal, I could see a situation where the Broncos are sitting there thinking, hell of a pass rusher, but did you see what happened when we went into that Buffalo game in the playoffs? Yeah. And we didn't have an edge rusher big enough to help stop the run at all. And Nick Bonito, like I said, hell of a pass rusher. He's never going to be that dominant run defender guy. That's just not his game. So I could see a situation where the Broncos go into this thinking, man, he's going to demand a big paycheck in the offseason. Are we willing to pay that knowing his deficiencies, or should we just cash out now while he just had the best year of his career?
I don't think it's the craziest idea. I really don't. I think there's some good arguments to be had about, if you're the Denver Broncos, do you want to give Nick Bonito that, Nick Bosa level contract extension? And I'm sure Broncos country is prickling at it when I say Nick Bosa level contract extension. That's going to be the market he's in, folks. He was when he has as many sacks as he does. It's going to be in that neighborhood. And yeah, if you're the Broncos, maybe you want to wait an extra season to see more before you give him that money. But then you're risking having to pay him even more, or him walking in free agency for absolutely nothing. And again, I think they probably keep Nick Bonito. Not the craziest thing that they trade him. I just think you would absolutely have to get a first round pick in return for him. Because, I imagine the team that trades for him is probably a borderline contender, maybe a team like Buffalo who wants to add a little pass rush juice to their operation. So it's going to be at the back of whatever round you receive the pick in. And I think you need to, when you trade Nick Bonito, to try and afford yourself some avenue to finding that guy. Because Cooper's a great player, but he's not that ace. Ellis, Tillman, I think look very promising. I don't think either of them project to be that ace. So I think you would have to get a premium pick or some sort of premium asset in return.
Yeah. I totally agree. I do think I like that you pointed out also that the Broncos put a second round pick into a player playing the same position as Nick Bonito last year as well. I think they largely went into last year thinking that went into this season thinking one of Jonathan Cooper or Nick Bonito probably aren't around for the longest, so we need to get ahead of it and draft Jonah Ellis now. Now, what ended up happening is everyone played better than what we anticipated, all of them. So now do you just say, okay, we're paying both of them, and we're just going to be okay? You already paid Cooper. You can't go back in time and not pay Cooper anymore, right? Are we okay paying 2 edge rushers and like that big contracts now? Nick Bonito's is going to skyrocket over Jonathan Cooper's, but are we okay sitting there thinking we paid 2 edge rushers, yet I don't think we have ace edge rusher, that a do-it-all guy. So it's interesting thought. I'm not saying I want it to happen before everyone yells at me. I just think it's an interesting thought at least. Zach, one more from you?
Yeah, I got one more. I'll also go defensive, but I'll go with them acquiring the defensive talent, so I don't get yelled at quite as much. Here, I've got a couple options that are appealing to me. Let's go the more exciting one here. One consistent theme in these trades are it's a team trying to get out of a jam. I think that's what you're going to have to see for these awesome talents to become available. Teams don't necessarily want to give up, a Garrett Wilson or whatever, but sometimes their hands are forced. So one of the teams I looked at was the Cleveland Browns, and they're facing a really tough time potentially with the Deshaun Watson deal and the fallout of that. It looks like it's going to be pretty devastating, and they're going to have to get cheap at some spots. They're also a very analytically minded operation. Maybe the most in college, in the NFL. I think it's them. The Eagles also come to mind. The Vikings come to mind, but those are probably the top 3 most analytically minded organizations. They generally don't believe in investing a lot in inside linebacker. Well, right now they have one of the highest paid inside linebackers in the league with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Once this Deshaun Watson, nuclear fallout starts to hit their salary cap and they have to, make some hard cuts. Think about, the Broncos moving on from Russell Wilson. They had to make some hard decisions like, cutting Justin Simmons, one of the better safeties in the league. They probably don't do that if their hand isn't forced to some extent. This could be a case here with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah where, man, we've got to save, $60 million, $70 million. Okay, well, here's a dude who can make up a big hunk of that, and he plays a position we don't believe in investing a ton of assets into. Plus, he would fill what the Broncos need at that position beautifully. In terms of like a great athlete who's instinctual, rangy, can help in the coverage game, can help blitz, which we know Vance Joseph loves doing. I think the biggest concern with this deal is, he's a lighter body who doesn't really help a ton in the run game. And that's what the Broncos already have in that room with Cody Barton and Justin Strnad.
Huge Cody Barton upgrade, though.
Exactly. It would be a big upgrade on those options. And also, Cody Barton's an impending free agent this year who you would have to give money to. Justin Strnad's going to get a pay raise this year in free agency. And then Alex Singleton, the one guy coming back, he's coming off an ACL. You probably don't even want him back. You might cut him. So it's a fresh room. I'm building it from the ground up. I'm not worried about does Owusu-Koramoah fit with Barton, because one, he's a much better player. And two, I think Barton might be moving on. I can also view it as, hey, rather than give Barton $5 million a year, let's give Owusu-Koramoah $10 million. Actually, it wouldn't even be that. It'd be like $7.5 million a year. And I can, okay, I'm paying $2.5 million more than I would have had to anyways. And I'm getting a much better, younger player with more upside. So I think that would make a lot of sense for the Denver Broncos. And just like, man, that'd be exciting. I've loved JOK ever since he was coming out of Notre Dame, and finally getting him in Denver, I think would be a hell of a lot of fun.
It would be fun. And yeah, the Broncos haven't had an athlete at linebacker in quite some time. It's been a really long time since I can honestly say the Broncos have had like a great athlete at that position. And that's what JOK would be. He's an explosive football player. I think you would see, while maybe not standing up and sticking interior linemen that as much as you'd like, maybe not stacking and shedding as much as some other options at inside linebacker, probably more explosive plays on your defense, probably more TFLs, shooting gaps, like doing stuff like that. And as you mentioned, Vance Joseph, we all know how much he likes to blitz. We all know how much he's drafted these athletic inside linebackers and just not seen them work. Why not just trade for the finished product of one of those type of guys? I think JOK pretty much is what people thought Isaiah Simmons would be, or very similar mold. Like he's that. And so, yeah, I like that. That's an interesting one, Zach.
I just, it's not a position you want to try and cultivate in the draft. To the exact point you made, it's so hard to draft those guys. It's a lot easier to find them in the veteran market, and there's not great free agents out there, especially in this year's class. JOK would be a great way to remedy that. And it's probably one of the, honestly, just the safest avenues. There's not many other avenues to acquire an off-ball linebacker where you're thinking, oh yeah, we're getting a really good off-ball linebacker here. At best it's a draft projection. And this is the position that has the lowest first-round hit rate of any position in the NFL draft. It's a scary position to draft.
It is. Because it's not a position that you can just bet on. It's not a position the NFL really likes drafting the most athletic dudes out there. Those guys always fly up the boards, and linebacker's not one of the positions that always translates to just drafting the most athletic guy and throwing him out there. That's not that linebacker position. A lot of instincts involved. You need experience at the position. You need to be able to read what's going on in front of you with the offensive lineman and react like that. It is a hard position to draft, most definitely. Either way, though, and I think this adds to your argument a little bit here, Zach, if the Broncos go out there, and you mentioned the guys earlier, Cody Barton, Alex Singleton, and Justin Strnad, if they run that group back, they failed. That's not good. You don't want that. Justin Strnad should not be slated as a starting inside linebacker next year. Alex Singleton probably shouldn't be slated as a starting inside linebacker last year or this next year. I think Cody Barton would probably be your best option because at least you know what you're getting. He's better than Strnad. Alex Singleton's more of a question mark. He's really not that good, though, to be doing that. Like, Cody Barton could look better, but it needs to be with a guy we know is actually really solid at that inside linebacker position.
Cody Barton just had a career year. Absolutely. Paying him for that career year, which still had flaws in it. It wasn't like he looked like Luke Kuechly out there.
Yeah.
Paying him for that career year when he has, 5 years prior to it that suggests he's not that player is always a big risk. And literally what the Broncos just got burned on with signing Alex Singleton. This was a guy on low-level contracts his entire career. Broncos signed him on a low-level 1-year deal. He pops. They sign him to a big-year deal. Immediately, he reverts to being the low-end contract player. I do think it's something you have to be worried about.
Yeah. Awesome. That was fun. I hope everyone enjoyed that exercise. That was a blast. Zach, like I mentioned earlier, he's going to have an article coming out. I think there's 9, right? 9 different trades.
Yep.
Blockbuster-esque trades the Broncos could make this offseason to improve their team. Sean Payton has never been a guy to shy away from making a big move. I think that's something people need to realize. I remember, in his day, him trading the Luka Doncic. Do you remember him trading Brandon Cooks still in his rookie year for a first-round pick, or still in his rookie deal with a first-round pick? Like, he's not afraid to do that. Do you remember him moving way up in the draft to draft a defensive end in Marcus Davenport? Like, he's done very aggressive moves before. He's not afraid to do that. So I wouldn't be shocked if we wake up one day and the Broncos just made a big move.
Fully
But
agree.
everyone, please like and subscribe. This was a hell of a show. Go Broncos, guys.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a little addendum here for the episode of Let's Talk Broncos you just watched. You might be wondering why the format and style got mixed up on you all of a sudden. That's because Joey and I pre-recorded the episode that just preceded this little thing I'm recording now. Talking, about some big trades the Broncos could maybe consider. And then this morning, Myles Garrett did the cool thing of requesting a trade, which immediately dated our episode because we did not see that coming and did not talk about Myles Garrett as a result. So unfortunately, Joey couldn't join me right now, but I wanted to hop back in and just kind of look at what could a Myles Garrett trade look like for the Broncos, and should they consider it? Really quick, just so we're not completely overlooking a pretty big topic. Really quick, for those of you who don't know, Myles Garrett has officially requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. That's very, very notable, of course. That said, it's also not a lock that he will get traded. The Browns are in a horrible cap situation, and trading Myles Garrett would cost them cap space because of the dead cap situation, much like cutting Russell Wilson hurt the Broncos cap situation. Again, the Browns aren't really in a position to do more negative damage to their cap. So that's going to be an interesting part of this. It's going to be something the Browns are extra motivated not to do as a result of that. And we're talking about a first ballot, no doubt Hall of Famer in his prime. So they're already at a premium position. So they're already pretty unwilling to trade him. So again, those are important factors, I think, to consider in all this. Should the Broncos do it? I think you should at least call. There's a reason Myles Garrett is already at age 29, a first ballot, no doubt Hall of Famer. He is a very unique talent. He has been the best pass rusher, maybe the best defensive player of the 2020s decade so far. Just looking at his first team All Pros and all that, he is, arguably the single most valuable non-quarterback you could add. Maybe like Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase are also in that conversation, but that's really the three. Should the Broncos consider this? Again, absolutely. You call. It's so rare a piece like this becomes available, and you need these star pieces as you try and chase a Lombardi. A big talking point as we look at the Bengals and why do the Bengals keep falling short? Well, they might need a little more star power on top of Josh Allen, some other guys who can dominate a play for you, like the Chiefs have with, not only Mahomes and Kelsey and a really talented offensive line on offense, they've also got some star defensive pieces with Chris Jones and Trent McDuffie. Having those star pieces that can win a given down for you is hugely important come the playoffs. Myles Garrett fits that bill as a guy who can go win a 3rd and 14 for you against Patrick Mahomes and make what, against 90% of the teams in the league is maybe a 15-yard conversion, can make it a sack or a throwaway because Myles Garrett is just there faster than any other pass rusher in the league. So you have to, I think, call about it. Now, that said, he's going to be very expensive and maybe quite possibly too expensive for the Broncos. Again, this is an amazing talent, the type that is very rarely available. He's going to cost a lot. Some of the perception I've seen in Broncos country about his value is way off where it actually is. Like what about Jonathan Cooper? And I think someone said Jonathan Cooper, Adam Troutman, and a second or something like that to me in my Twitter comments. It's like, you're getting laughed off the phone. I think the floor is 2 first-round picks. And the only way you're not giving up 2 first-round picks is if you give up a first-round pick and a premium young asset that could, be the equivalent of a first round pick that could equate to a first round pick. So like Nick Bonito, right? Myles Garrett is going to have a very similar value to Surtain. Yeah, he's a few years older. He also plays a more valuable position that teams are much more willing to pay a top of the line value for. He might even have better trade value than Patrick Surtain. So picture, when you talk about a Myles Garrett trade idea, picture what you would have to be offered to feel cool about the Broncos trading Pat Surtain, right? If the team offered you a Jonathan Cooper type and an Adam Troutman type and a even first round pick for Surtain, is that getting it done for you? I doubt a lot of people in Broncos country would be happy with that. So the price is going to be very, very expensive. Might be 2 first round picks and, a third or something like that. It's going to be very pricey. And that's extra painful for the Denver Broncos. One of the elements of trading picks is of course you're trading what's going to turn into a player, but more than that, you're trading what will turn into a highly drafted player on a cost controlled contract. First round, second round picks, even third round picks are some of the best avenues teams have to acquiring surplus value, players that are better than the contract number they are playing on, right? The Broncos haven't had as many of those opportunities because of the Sean Payton trade, because of the Russell Wilson trade. So they're already hurting for those contracts that are providing a lot of surplus value, which can allow you to overspend in some of these areas. Taking away more premium picks to go after a Myles Garrett, I think would be very, very difficult. For me, for the Broncos, I think you want to think if you could get him for, let's say, a first round pick, Nick Bonito, and then maybe something else, like that, the first round pick and the Nick Bonito are the foundation of the deal, I could get around that. 20th overall pick this year. It's nice, but it's something the Broncos could part with. And then Nick Bonito, yes, he's young and cost controlled for one more year, but after that year, you're going to have to give him a Myles Garrett-esque deal, which may be why the Browns wouldn't be interested in it. But this is a world where I think it works for the Broncos. If the Browns were interested in that, I think the Broncos could talk themselves into it. We're going to be devoting this money to this roster spot / this position anyways. Why not do that with a player we know is literally the best in the world at it, as opposed to a guy who's had one pretty good, really good season? This was by far the best year of Nick Bonito's career, and he was maybe as good as Myles Garrett in a down year. And no insult to Nick Bonito. It was an awesome season. He deserved the Defensive Player of the Year hype, but his best still couldn't quite equal like an average Myles Garrett season. So that's something to consider. Again, I think that's what it would have to look like for the Broncos. If I had to bet where Myles Garrett lands, I think it's more likely a team like the Bills, like the Lions, who can talk themselves into, we are this one piece away, where the Broncos need some more building along with that one piece. Nonetheless, again, anytime a player like this comes available, you got to call on it. And I know a lot of Broncos country is not a fan of the Broncos making another really expensive trade after how damaging the Russell Wilson deal was. And I think that makes sense. But as the Broncos pursue, chasing down the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills in this conference, they're going to have to add some star pieces, maybe a star receiver, maybe a star pass rusher, a star running back, whatever. And if they're consistently picking in the late teens or 20s, it's going to be hard to find that, legit number one receiver or whatever, that upgrade on like a Nick Bonito type that can be your real, a game-changing pass rusher that you never take off the field or you never want to take off the field. The best avenue to acquire those things at a point here is probably going to be some sort of massive trade. Teams do not let pieces like that hit free agency. When they do hit free agency, like T. Higgins, you're going to have 20 teams bidding on him. It's going to be very hard to win that bidding war, even when they do become available. And you can find him after pick 20 in the draft, but it's a strategy that probably isn't worth banking on, that you're just going to find like your all pro receiver after pick 20. Has it happened? Yes. Plenty of the receivers that are currently all pros went after pick 20. You're better off, targeting the CD Lambs, the Justin Jeffersons of the world. I guess he was right after pick 20, but you get what I mean? It's hard to find those guys. So yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind, because I prickle at the idea of the Broncos making another massive trade. But when I do think about it a little more, it's like, this is maybe the only way to feel confident they're getting Bo Nix this level of weapon to help his development, like a Garrett Wilson, for example. All right. I think that'll do it for this. Everyone, check out my article. I am writing it right now, already a few trades in. I was teasing that there were 9 in that episode I just did with Joey. Because of this Myles Garrett thing, I've added a 10th, which is the Myles Garrett one. So even more in-depth thoughts on that than what I just gave in this little 11-minute add-on. Anyways, thank you all for supporting the show, for stopping by, for watching us. It means a lot to me, Joey, and Bree. I know our schedules have been rough over these past few weeks, maybe even months. A lot of that is admittedly my fault, but we are working hard to find a long-term solution to that. Pre-recording for a show like tonight, it is, something we're working to do to try and get you guys these shows regularly, because we really love doing them and just need to find a way to make it work with our schedule. But so again, yeah, thank you all. Thanks for liking the show. Thanks for commenting. It means a lot to us all. Have a great rest of your Monday night, and see you hopefully on Wednesday.